Okay. Financial direction, not financial perfection. So in last week on Tuesday, we talked about the number one rule is to, after you give your money to God, to start saving 10%, no less than 10%, and pay yourself first. And that's going to come into play by saving up the emergency fund we talked about. And then on Thursday, we went into what to do with the other 90% with a 65-20-15 rule. And if you can't do that, falling back on a 70-20-10 rule. And 70 is what you live on, or 65 is what you live on. 20 pays off all your debt, and then either 10 or 15% in paying yourself. And the only reason we said 15% was if you had a 401k match. That's free money. Take advantage of it while you can. So tonight, what we're going to do is talk about debt and what debt really costs. And I pulled some pictures that I took from the Financial Ministries, Crown Ministries books, and they had some really good information on there and really detailed information. So we're going to go over debt. What does it actually cost? Here's a picture of some debt, and it says assume that you have $5,560 in credit card debt at 18%. This would cost you about $1,000 annually for this debt. So after year 5, it'd be 5,000, year 10, 10,000, and so on until year 40, and they projected out to 40 years. And then it said, what would you accumulate if you took that $1,000 instead and invest it, earning around 12%, which is a little bit above market rate. Market rate, they say you can get about 10%, but if you could get 12%, which people have, in this example, this is what you would have in 5 years. 6,300, year 10, 17,000, year 20, 72,000, year 30, 241,000, and year 40, $767,000. And that's just investing that $1,000 that you're losing on that interest on that debt. And then the third piece, I really like this, and I'm not going to go into the math of it, but how much would the lender earn on your interest payment at this 18% interest? Because the lender just turns around the credit card and gets 18% again. And in year 5, it's 7,100. Year 10, it's 2,300. Year 20, 146,000. Year 30, 790,000. And year 40, $4.1 million. And this is insane, but it's just what people have referred to as the eighth wonder of the world, compound interest. And it kind of seems like it's flat, seems not like it's not growing, and then at the end it just kind of starts shooting up. And that's kind of how compound interest can be used for your benefit. So going over to another example, we're going to look at a house payment. If you bought a house for $100,000, and in their example in this book, it was written a little bit a while ago where this would be a realistic interest rate on a house. Right now it's about half of this, but I'm just going to show you for this example because the numbers of math just work out super easy. $100,000 at 10% for 30 years. Your original mortgage payment is $100,000. That's if you borrowed the whole amount. We're not even going to put a down payment, just for purposes of math. And I've got my young daughter just talking. Your monthly payment with the 10% is around $877 a month. And then you're going to pay this for 360 months, 30 years. Your total payments are over 3 times the amount of the original purchase of the house. But this doesn't include insurance, property taxes, or possible HOA fees. So you can kind of see how that interest is used in banking to work against you. That's how they make their money. It's not a bad thing. You're going to buy a house, you're going to rent, you're going to put money towards a place to live. But I show you this to show you how you can now flip that. So when we start paying off our debt, we can start using that extra money to set ourselves up in the future. And by flipping it, I know these numbers are super tiny because I honestly was not expecting them to get this tiny on the projector. But this is assuming that you put about $200 a month away every month for just investments, for just savings, but you're going to do it in a mutual fund or something of that nature to start increasing and being able to increasing your wealth and being able to retire. And this on the far left on the first one, it shows you year 1 through 30. So this is just a 30-year period. This is your deposit. The first one starts off assuming that you have $200 in savings already, and then you put $2,400 to it. And then how much interest you'll make off of that, it's like $148. And then it goes all the way down to year 30, where your interest that you're earning is around $38,000. And then your ending balance, just off of that $200 a month for 30 years, winds up being a little over $419,000. And then I put it on a little scale so you can kind of see the difference. In the green is just what you're contributing. And as you contribute, your contributions total go up at a steady pace. But what you see is the interest payments on the compound interest and the interest that you're getting off of your investment start to go up about the same way, and then you can kind of see how it just kind of skyrockets, because you're taking that interest and you're having it automatically reinvested into your investment. So when I think about debt, and we're kind of talking about this a little bit before class started, I'm averse to debt. I do not like debt, and this is one of the reasons, because and I'll think of the term here in a second. It just lost me. But there's a time. Oh man, I just lost it. It's like time, a lost time element to, if you go into debt for $1,000, I'm losing all this interest for 30 years on that $1,000. And that's how I've started to have to look at debt, to just keep myself away from it. Yeah, sorry. But I'm trying to think of that term, and now I can't think of it. It'll come to me here in a second. So, going back to implementing the 65-20 part of the rule, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on just living on 65% of your income. And I already know not everybody has that ability. So if you can't do that, we'll flip it to the 70-20-10 rule and just focus on living on the 70%. But I highly advocate for this just because it helps you get out of debt quicker, and then you can take advantage of any of the 401 contributions that are matched. So when you're focusing on living on 65% of your income, what are some ways that can help? Well, you can go through and just when we went in week 1 and Tuesday, you listed off all your debts, all your subscriptions, all the things you spend money on. Those are expenses, Christmas, birthdays. And I'm not saying we're going to cut those out. But like we talked about on Tuesday, you can afford anything. You just can't afford everything. So you're going to have to figure out ways where you can afford to pay off this debt faster by figuring out things that you don't necessarily need to afford now. Not forever, just now. And some basic examples I put up were Netflix, Starbucks, money that you put into your food budget, going to restaurants and such. And then the debt part of it, we're going to focus on using 20% of all the income that we take home after we've given our money to God to throw out all the debt. And we've talked about it a little bit before, but you're going to start with the smallest debt first. You're going to arrange them smallest to largest. And I know there's a huge debate of, well, this one has 18% interest and this one has 4%. Okay, well, that's great. But we're going to focus on smallest to largest, and if you get two that are pretty similar, 4,000 and 5,500, and 4,000 has 4% and 5,500 has 18%, and you want to flip them, go for it, if that makes more sense in your brain. But the point is to go ahead and pay off the smallest one first, and then throw all the remaining money that you had at that one at the next one, so that you have a sense of accomplishment. It starts to give you this like little dopamine effect of you actually accomplished it, you paid something off, and then it helps you keep going, because this is not I'm going to do this tomorrow and I'm going to be debt free. This is going to be a process, because if you were like me, it took me 28 years to get into all of my debt. So I assumed it was going to take 28 years to get out of all of my debt. Now, I was blessed and it didn't take that long, but as long as it took you to get into your position, It might take just as long to get out of that position, depending on some factors that are unique to all the individuals. So we're going to start by arranging smallest to largest debt, and then if you want to organize by highest interest rate somewhere in there and it makes sense to you, go for it. But you want to start paying off that smallest debt as fast as possible. And we've already talked about it. If you can't do the 65-20-15 rule, then focus on doing 70-20-10. But the point I want to make here on the debt is, if you start out by making it a priority to pay yourself 10% first and put it over into the savings account where you don't even see it, and start building up your emergency fund. And then your second priority is to throw 20% of everything you make at all of your debt. It makes it so much easier to live on what's left over. Because when I was starting out, I didn't make what I make now. I started out working over, refereeing soccer. That was just a summertime job, but I started out working at a movie theater, and I think they paid me like $5 an hour. And what I made was what I spent, because I hadn't figured out what a credit card was yet. But I lived within my means. I couldn't spend money I didn't have. But what happened was I got a job over at Best Buy paying $10 an hour. Well, now I was making more money. I had more money to spend. So it's the same principle here. When you were making very little, you were spending very little. And now that you're making more, you're spending more. And you've just raised your cost of living yourself by things that you wanted to do. And it's just time to find out which ones are a priority, a need, or which ones are a priority that are a want. And then which ones you can get by without having while you focus on paying off your debt. And I think that's pretty much it for tonight. It's just focusing on trying to help everybody understand what the cost of debt really is, what you're losing out in the future with that compound interest, and how they use compound interest against you to make their money, and how you can use it for you to start saving and investing and becoming a little bit more and more financially free and debt free. So that's going to be it for tonight, and then we'll come back on Thursday and continue the conversation.